He murdered his pregnant wife with a single brutal kick. Then he went looking for a boy. Not just any boy, but one with delicate features and a haunting resemblance to the woman he had killed. When he found him, he had the boy castrated, dressed in royal silks, given the title of Empress, and married him in a public Roman ceremony. The boy's name was Sporus. The man who did it was Nero, Emperor of Rome. This is a story not of love or power, but of obsession, identity theft, and a young life twisted beyond recognition to fit the fantasy of a broken emperor. It's one of the darkest corners of Roman imperial history, and one of the most disturbing love stories ever recorded. To understand how such a thing could happen, we must begin with the man at the center of it all. Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, Rome's fifth emperor. But he wasn't born a Caesar. He was born Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus in 37 AD into a lineage both powerful and cursed. His mother, Agrippina the Younger, was the sister of the infamous Emperor Caligula, and her ambition was matched only by her ruthlessness. When Nero was a child, his father died, possibly poisoned. Agrippina quickly remarried, this time to her own uncle, the Emperor Claudius. She maneuvered to have Nero adopted by Claudius, displacing Claudius's own son Britannicus in the line of succession. Not long after, Claudius mysteriously died, most likely poisoned by Agrippina herself, and the teenage Nero ascended to the throne. At just 16, Nero became the most powerful man in the Roman world, but behind him stood his mother, a woman who believed she was the true architect of his rise. In the early years of his reign, Nero was controlled by her, by his tutors Seneca and Burrus, and by the expectations of a fragile empire. At first, he played the role of a benevolent ruler well. He reduced taxes, improved public welfare, and even banned capital punishment briefly. But this was the calm before the storm. Nero's tastes leaned not toward politics, but performance. He fancied himself an artist, a musician, a poet. He wanted not to rule an empire, but to be adored, like the gods on stage he so admired. And when reality failed to match his desires, he reshaped reality. He also craved control, especially over those closest to him. His relationship with his mother deteriorated quickly. Agrippina had helped create the emperor, but she refused to step aside. Their power struggle ended in tragedy. Nero ordered her murder, reportedly staging a shipwreck, and when that failed, having her executed. Roman historians say he inspected her corpse personally. Next came his marriage. His first wife, Octavia, was the daughter of Claudius and a symbol of political unity, but she was cold, politically passive, and worst of all, Nero resented her, grew bored, and eventually had her banished, then executed under false charges of adultery. He then married Poppaea Sabina, a woman who was clever, seductive, and, according to Tacitus, manipulative enough to capture Nero's complete devotion. Poppaea was everything Nero wanted in a consort. Beautiful, sharp-tongued, and politically ambitious, she flattered his ego and shared his taste for spectacle. But their relationship was volatile. Poppaea was pregnant with Nero's child when, during a violent argument, Nero kicked her in the abdomen. She died from the injuries. The unborn child perished with her. Nero's grief was immediate and grotesquely theatrical. Some say he wept uncontrollably. Others say he refused to believe she was truly gone. He had her embalmed with rare spices and buried with honors, usually reserved for goddesses. But mourning wasn't enough. Nero wanted her back, physically, visually, in flesh. That's when he found Sporus was a young boy, likely a slave or a court servant, described by ancient writers as remarkably beautiful. Most importantly, he resembled Poppaea. Seeing in him the chance to resurrect his lost empress, did the unthinkable. He ordered the boy castrated. Castration was illegal in Rome. It was seen as a defilement of the body and a threat to masculine identity. But for emperors, the law bent Islam. Sporus, barely a teenager, had his future ripped away, not just biologically, but spiritually, socially, and personally. He was no longer allowed to grow into a man. Instead, he was shaped into a memory. Nero named him Poppaea. He dressed him in the former Empress's gowns, veils, and jewels. He assigned him an imperial entourage. In the eyes of the court, Sporus was now a woman, because Nero said so. The boy became the Empress of Rome in title and appearance, though never in choice. Then Nero staged a wedding. This wasn't a quiet arrangement hidden behind palace walls. This was a public performance. Nero wore the robes of a groom, and Sporus, dressed in bridal finery, was given in marriage in front of nobles, officials, and military commanders. Guests attended, vows were made, and the emperor kissed his new wife. Sealing the grotesque illusion, Roman society was appalled. But no one protested. Speaking against the emperor meant risking torture, exile, or execution. And by this point, Nero had already proven he was capable of killing anyone, including his own family, to maintain his fantasies. Sporus, still a child, was thrust into a life of unthinkable trauma. He wasn't just abused, he was rebranded, his very identity erased and overwritten with that of a dead woman. For Nero, Sporus wasn't a person, he was a symbol, a breathing monument to Poppaea, whom Nero both adored and destroyed. The spectacle didn't end in Rome. Nero and Sporus toured the empire together, appearing in public as husband and wife. In Greece, where Nero indulged his artistic ambitions by performing in theaters and chariot races, Sporus was often at his side. He received gifts, honors, and public attention, all under a stolen name. One might ask, did Sporus ever resist? There's no record of rebellion. But then, there wouldn't be. The ancient writers, all men, focused on Nero's depravity, not Sporus's suffering. The boy's thoughts, feelings, and voice were never recorded. He is remembered not as himself, but as what Nero made him. His silence in the sources speaks louder than words. But Sporus' story doesn't end with Nero's death. By 68 AD, Nero's reign had imploded. Years of cruelty, economic collapse, and political instability led to rebellion. The army turned on him. The Senate declared him a public enemy. Facing capture and humiliation, Nero fled Rome with Sporus and a few loyal servants in a villa outside the city, cornered and terrified. Nero prepared to kill himself, but even in that, he couldn't act alone. A servant helped him drive a dagger into his throat. His last words, according to legend, were qualis. With Nero dead, the empire fell into chaos, a period known as the Year of the Four Emperors. And through it all, Sporus remained a political pawn. The next emperor, Otho, who had once been married to Poppaea before Nero took Sporus into his household. Some sources claimed he continued to treat Sporus as Poppaea's surrogate, perhaps even as a lover. Once again, Sporus was forced to play a role, not of his choosing. Later, the Emperor Vitellius rose to power. He planned to humiliate Sporus in a public spectacle. A mock wedding where Sporus would be married to a gladiator, followed by a staged assault in the arena. It was to be a brutal parody of Nero's original ceremony, and an act of political theater designed to erase Nero's lingering myth, but Sporus wouldn't allow it. Faced with the prospect of further degradation, Sporus chose death. According to Suetonius, he took his own life before the spectacle could be carried out. No ceremony, no eulogy, just an ending. Quiet and tragic. And yet, his legacy lingers. Historians often debate how to interpret Sporus' life. Was he a victim of imperial abuse? A passive figure swept up in the madness of a crumbling regime? Or something more complicated? A survivor who navigated power with no good options? Perhaps the most honest answer is this. We don't know who Sporus was. We only know what others turned him into. Nero's treatment of Sporus is often cited as one of the clearest examples of his descent into madness. But it also reveals something deeper about the Roman imperial system. How absolute power can bend reality, distort identity, and consume innocence. In a world where emperors were gods, the people closest to them often became sacrifices. Sporus wasn't the only person to be destroyed by Nero's grief, vanity, or violence. But his story stands apart because it is both intimate and terrifying. It wasn't enough for Nero to kill Poppaea. He had to relive her, reconstruct her, and possess her in the form of a child. And the fact that Sporus became a footnote in the histories, remembered only through Nero's twisted lens, is a second tragedy. His real name is lost. His voice was never written down. His image exists only through the veils and titles imposed on him. But we remember him, not as a wife, not as an empress, but as a boy whose life was taken piece by piece by an empire that valued fantasy over truth, control over humanity, and silence over suffering. History often praises emperors and generals. It builds monuments to their victories and writes poems about their glory. But the most important stories are often the quietest. The ones like Sporus's, hidden between the lines of scandal, cruelty, and forgotten sorrow. Because in the end, the Roman Empire did not fall because of armies or invasions. It crumbled from within, corroded by decadence, abuse, and the belief that one man's will was worth more than another's life. Sporus was a victim, but he was also a mirror, a reflection of what happens when power is absolute and humanity is optional. And through his story, we are reminded, history is not only made by those who rule, but by those who endure.